Before we dive into this incredible story of love across the stars, please give this video a thumbs up if you're ready for an emotional journey. Subscribe to our channel for more science fiction romance stories that will leave you breathless. And let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I love connecting with our global community of story lovers. The transport shuttle vibrated beneath my boots as we descended through the crimson atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Through the reinforced viewport, the sprawling research facility came into view, a stark metallic complex carved into the rust-colored mountains like a wound in the alien landscape. My stomach twisted with a mixture of anticipation and dread. After 3 years of requesting this assignment, I was finally here, about to meet the most dangerous and mysterious prisoner in human space. "First time seeing the facility, Dr. Cross?" Captain Reynolds asked from the pilot's seat, his weathered face reflected in the glass. "First time seeing anything like this," I admitted, adjusting the collar of my research uniform. The facility was massive, easily the size of a small city, with energy barriers crackling between towering spires that disappeared into the perpetual fog that shrouded the mountain peaks. "Wait until you see her," Reynolds muttered, his voice carrying a weight that made my skin crawl. 3 years I've been running transport to this rock, and I still get nightmares about those eyes. They say she can see right through you, read your thoughts like an open book. I'd read the classified files dozens of times, memorized every detail of first contact and the subsequent capture. The being they called Zara, though that wasn't her real name, which apparently couldn't be pronounced by human vocal cords, had been found drifting in a damaged vessel near the Outer Rim colonies. At nearly 12 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, she was undeniably beautiful in an otherworldly way. But beauty could be deceiving. The reports painted her as cold, calculating, possibly psychopathic. During her capture, she had allegedly used some form of emotional manipulation to turn 3 research teams against each other, resulting in 17 deaths before she was finally contained. The survivors described feeling overwhelming waves of artificial emotion, love, hate, fear, desire, all projected into their minds with surgical precision. She was, according to the psychological profiles, incapable of genuine emotional connection, which was exactly why they needed someone like me. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud, and within minutes I was being escorted through multiple security checkpoints by Director Harrison, a stern woman in her 50s whose grey hair was pulled back in a tight bun that seemed to stretch her features. "Dr. Cross, I want to be absolutely clear about the parameters of your research," she said, as we walked down a sterile corridor lined with armed guards. "You are here to study her methods of emotional manipulation, not to be manipulated yourself. The moment we detect any unusual psychological patterns in your behavior, you will be removed from this assignment." "Understood," I replied, though privately I wondered how they would distinguish between her influence and the natural psychological effects of prolonged isolation that might drive any researcher to empathize with their subject. We stopped before a massive blast door marked with warning symbols in 17 different languages. Director Harrison placed her palm on a scanner, and the door began to cycle open with a low, ominous hum. "Remember, Dr. Cross, she's not human. Whatever she makes you feel, whatever emotions she projects, they are not real. She has no capacity for genuine emotion herself." The door finished opening, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. My breath caught in my throat. The room was enormous, easily 100 feet across and 50 feet high, with walls made of some kind of translucent energy field that hummed with barely contained power. And there, in the center of the space, sat the most beautiful and terrifying being I had ever seen. Zara was exactly as described in the files, yet somehow the clinical reports had failed to capture the reality of her presence. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her 12-foot frame making the vast chamber seem almost intimate. Her skin did indeed shimmer with an inner light, a soft, pearl-like luminescence that seemed to pulse gently with her breathing. Her hair, if it could be called that, appeared to be made of fine silver threads that moved with a life of their own, occasionally catching the light and throwing prismatic reflections across the walls. But it was her eyes that held me frozen. They were large, perhaps twice the size of human eyes, and colored a deep violet that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When she looked up at me through the energy barrier, I felt something shift in my chest, a flutter of recognition, as if I were seeing someone I had known my entire life. "Another curious little human," she said, and her voice was like music, resonating at frequencies that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate directly in my bones. "Tell me, small one, what makes you different from the others?" I forced myself to speak, my voice embarrassingly hoarse. "I'm Dr. Cross. I'm here to learn about you." She tilted her head, studying me with those impossibly deep eyes. "Learn about me? How delightfully naive. Your kind comes here seeking to understand something you lack the capacity to comprehend. You see before you what you call a monster, a manipulator, a creature without heart or soul, but you know nothing of what I truly am." "Then tell me," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Help me understand." For the first time, something like surprise flickered across her ethereal features. The silver threads of her hair seemed to still, and the light beneath her skin pulsed a little brighter. "You ask me to tell you about myself? No human has ever asked me that before. They poke and prod and test. They monitor my brain patterns and chart my emotional responses, but none have ever simply asked." I moved closer to the energy barrier, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Director Harrison behind me. "What would you like me to know?" Zara was silent for a long moment, those galactic eyes studying me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, more contemplative. "I come from a world where emotion is not hidden behind masks and pretenses as it is with your kind. We feel everything, joy, sorrow, love, loss, with an intensity that would drive your species mad. But we also understand the responsibility that comes with such power. To feel deeply is to risk great pain, but also to experience transcendent beauty." She paused, and I noticed that her luminescence had dimmed slightly, as if the memory itself was painful. "When I was young, though young for my kind means something different than it does for yours, I fell in love with a being of pure light. He was beautiful beyond description, and for a brief, shining moment, we shared a connection that made the stars themselves weep with joy. But love, real love, requires vulnerability. It requires trust, and trust, I learned, is a luxury that can destroy you." I found myself leaning against the energy barrier, completely absorbed in her words. "What happened? He betrayed me," she said simply. "Used our bond to access the deepest parts of my being, learned the secrets of my species' emotional abilities, and then shared those secrets with our enemies. The war that followed decimated my world. Billions died because I dared to love without reservation." The pain in her voice was so raw, so genuine, that I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. But then I remembered Director Harrison's warning. This could all be an act, an elaborate manipulation designed to make me lower my guard. "That's a beautiful story," I said carefully. "But how do I know you're telling the truth?" For the first time, Zara smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise over an alien ocean. "You don't, and that, dear Dr. Cross, is precisely why you are different from the others. You listen with your heart, but you think with your mind. Most fascinating." The session ended soon after, with Director Harrison practically dragging me away from the containment chamber. But as we left, I couldn't shake the image of Zara's smile, or the way her eyes had seemed to see straight into my soul. That night, in my assigned quarters, I reviewed the recordings of our conversation. On paper, analyzing the audio patterns and reviewing the video footage, everything about our interaction seemed calculated, designed to elicit sympathy. Her story was perfectly crafted to appeal to my academic interest in cross-species psychology, while simultaneously painting her as a tragic figure worthy of compassion. And yet, There had been something in her eyes when she spoke of her lost love, a flicker of genuine pain that seemed too raw, too real to be fabricated. I'd spent years studying human psychology, learning to read micro-expressions and identify emotional manipulation. If Zara was acting, she was better at it than any human I'd ever encountered. I fell asleep that night dreaming of galaxies swirling in violet eyes, and woke with the strange sensation that someone had been singing to me in a language I didn't understand, but somehow knew by heart. The next morning brought my second session with Zara. This time I came prepared with questions based on her story, designed to test the consistency of her narrative. "Tell me about your homeworld," I said after the preliminary security checks were complete. "What was it like?" She was sitting in a different position today, one leg drawn up to her chest, her arms wrapped around her knee, in a pose that seemed almost childlike, despite her imposing size. "Velthara was a world of eternal twilight," she began, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. "3 moons hung in our sky, each one a different color, silver, gold, and deep blue. The light they cast created a landscape of perpetual sunset, where the sky painted itself in shades that your eyes cannot see." As she spoke, I noticed something remarkable happening. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and for just a moment I could have sworn I saw flashes of the world she described. Alien trees with crystalline leaves that chimed like bells in an otherworldly breeze. Cities that seemed to be carved from single massive gems that reflected the tricolored moonlight in spectacular patterns. "Are you projecting these images?" I asked, my scientific curiosity overriding my caution. "I am sharing a memory," she replied. "Your mind is translating it into forms you can understand. Most humans cannot process such complex emotional sensory data, but you—" She tilted her head, studying me again. "You are different indeed." Over the following days, our sessions became the highlight of my existence. Zara shared stories of her world, her people, their culture and customs. I learned that her species, the Velthani, experienced emotion as a form of energy that could be shared and manipulated, not as a weapon, as human researchers had assumed, but as a form of communication more intimate than any language. "Imagine," she explained during our 5th session, "if you could not only tell someone you love them, but actually share the feeling of love itself. Let them experience exactly what you experience, understand your emotions, not through words, but through direct transmission of the feeling itself." "But wouldn't that be invasive?" I asked, "to have someone else's emotions imposed on you?" "Only if it is done without consent," she replied. "Among my people, the sharing of emotion is a sacred act, reserved for the deepest bonds of trust and intimacy. What your species calls manipulation, we call communication." I was beginning to understand why the human researchers had misunderstood her so completely. They had encountered abilities beyond their comprehension and immediately categorized them as threats. But the more I learned about Zara's culture, the more I realized that her species was not naturally deceptive or manipulative. They were simply operating from a completely different paradigm of social interaction. "The incident during your capture," I said carefully during our 8th session. "The reports say you turned the research teams against each other. What really happened?" For the first time in days, Zara's luminescence dimmed significantly. She was quiet for so long that I began to wonder if she would answer at all. "I was dying," she finally whispered. "My ship had been damaged in a solar storm, my life support systems failing. When your people found me, I was delirious with pain and fear. In my delirium, I reached out with my abilities, seeking help, seeking comfort. But your species, you process emotions so differently than we do." She looked up at me, and I saw genuine anguish in those galactic eyes. I projected my pain into their minds, not meaning to hurt them, but desperate for them to understand my suffering. But human minds are not equipped to handle the full intensity of Velthani emotion. The pain I shared with them, my fear, my desperation, my grief for everything I had lost, it drove them mad. They turned on each other because they could not process what they were feeling. And the deaths were my fault, she said simply. Not intentional, but my fault nonetheless. I have carried the weight of those 17 lives every moment since. Another reason why I am truly as dangerous as your leaders believe, though not in the way they think. Dado, that night, I sat in my quarters reviewing our conversation, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine emotional connection with another being. Not the surface-level relationships I maintained with colleagues, not the carefully managed interactions of professional life, but real deep understanding. And that terrified me. Because if Director Harrison was right, if everything I was feeling was artificially induced, then Zara was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. She wasn't just manipulating my emotions. She was making me feel things I had convinced myself I was incapable of feeling. But if she was telling the truth, then I was falling in love with a being who had been condemned to eternal isolation for crimes born of desperation and misunderstanding. Either way, I was in serious trouble. 2 weeks into my assignment, I realized I was no longer studying Zara. I was anticipating her. Every morning, I found myself waking earlier than necessary, eager to return to the containment chamber. Every evening I lingered in my quarters, replaying our conversations and analyzing not just the content of what she shared, but the way her luminescence shifted with her moods, the subtle changes in her voice when she spoke of painful memories, the almost musical quality of her laughter when I shared stories of human absurdity. This was dangerous territory, and I knew it. Dr. Cross! Director Harrison's voice crackled through my comm unit as I prepared for my 15th session with Zara. Please report to my office before proceeding to the containment level. I found her reviewing my daily reports, her expression troubled. Your research is becoming less clinical, she observed without preamble. Your reports read more like personal journals than scientific observations. I'm building rapport with the subject, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Trust is essential for gathering accurate psychological data. Trust? Harrison looked up sharply. Dr. Cross, she is not your friend. She is a weapon of mass destruction with the capacity to turn your own mind against you. These feelings you're developing, they are not real. But that was exactly the problem. They felt real. More real than anything I had experienced in years. Director, I said carefully, what if we've been wrong about her? What if the emotional projection isn't manipulation, but genuine communication? What if she's telling the truth about her people's abilities being misunderstood? Harrison's expression hardened. Dr. Cross, you are exhibiting classic signs of psychological manipulation. I'm putting you on observation protocol. Any further signs of emotional compromise, and you will be removed from this assignment. The observation protocol meant that my sessions with Zara would now be monitored not just by security cameras, but by a team of psychologists analyzing my every word and gesture for signs of alien influence. It also meant that I had to be even more careful about hiding what I was beginning to feel. When I entered the containment chamber that day, Zara looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before, something almost like worry. You're troubled, she observed, rising from her meditative position to move closer to the energy barrier. Your emotional signature is chaotic. My what? Your emotional signature. Every sentient being projects a unique pattern of emotional energy. Yours is usually quite stable, but today it's fractured, conflicted. She paused, her violet eyes searching my face. They suspect, don't they? Your superiors. They believe I am influencing you. I glanced toward the observation windows, knowing that every word of this conversation was being recorded and analyzed. Are you? Do you believe I am? I don't know what to believe anymore, I admitted. Everything I feel when I'm here with you, it could be real, or it could be exactly what Director Harrison says. Artificial emotions projected into my mind to manipulate me. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her luminescence dimming to barely a glow. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. Marcus, she said, using my first name for the first time. May I share something with you? Something I have never shared with any other human. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Among my people, there is a concept called Velthara. It translates roughly to soul recognition. It occurs when two beings encounter each other and experience an immediate, profound connection that transcends physical attraction or intellectual compatibility. It is the recognition of a kindred spirit across any divide, species, culture, even dimension. She moved as close to the energy barrier as she could, and I found myself drawn forward until only the crackling field separated us. The first moment I saw you, I felt Velthara. Not the artificial connection I might project to manipulate you, but genuine recognition. You see me, Marcus, not as a monster or a weapon or a curiosity to be studied, but as a being worthy of understanding. Do you know how rare that is? I could feel my heart racing, and I knew the monitoring equipment would be detecting the elevated stress response. Zara, I am going to do something now that will either prove my sincerity or condemn me forever in your eyes, she said. I'm going to show you exactly what I am feeling, without filters, without protection, without any attempt to make it palatable for your human sensibilities. If I am manipulating you, you will know it. If my feelings are genuine, you will know that too. Before I could protest, before I could step back, I felt something shift in the air around us. The energy barrier began to hum at a different frequency, and suddenly I was drowning in sensation. Love. Pure, overwhelming, desperate love crashed into my consciousness like a tidal wave. But it wasn't the gentle, romantic love of human poetry. It was cosmic in its intensity, ancient and profound and terrifyingly complete. Along with the love came loneliness so vast it threatened to tear my mind apart. Centuries of isolation and misunderstanding crystallized into pure emotional agony. I felt her memories of her homeworld, the weight of the lives lost because of her abilities, the gradual erosion of hope as year after year passed in captivity. And through it all, threading like silver light through the darkness, was her growing affection for me. I felt the moment she first saw me, experienced her surprise at finding someone who listened without fear, who asked questions with genuine curiosity rather than clinical detachment. I felt her joy during our conversations, her anticipation of my daily visits, her growing dread that I would eventually leave like all the others. The experience lasted only seconds, but when it ended, I collapsed to my knees, gasping and shaking. Through the observation windows, I could hear alarms going off, voices shouting orders. Security teams would be mobilizing, preparing to storm the chamber, but I barely noticed any of it. Because in those few seconds of shared consciousness, I had experienced something impossible. I had felt exactly what Zara felt, and I knew beyond any doubt that it was real. "Now you know," she whispered, her own luminescence flickering weakly. The emotional sharing had clearly cost her significant energy. "Now you know the truth of what I am." Before I could respond, the chamber doors burst open and security personnel flooded in. Director Harrison was shouting orders, medical technicians were scanning me with various instruments, and through it all, I could only stare at Zara as they prepared to drag me away. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant for this to happen." "Neither did I whispered back, just before they sedated me. I woke up in the medical wing 12 hours later, strapped to a bed and connected to more monitoring equipment than I had known existed. Director Harrison sat beside me, her expression grim. "Well, Dr. Cross, you've certainly provided us with valuable data," she said. "The readings from your exposure to her unfiltered emotional projection are unlike anything we've ever recorded. Your brain activity spiked to levels that should have caused permanent damage, yet somehow you're completely intact." "She didn't hurt me," I said, my voice hoarse from the sedatives. "She showed me the truth." "She showed you what she wanted you to see," Harrison corrected. "The psychological evaluation team is unanimous. You've been completely compromised. You're being transferred off-world tomorrow. You can't do that. Your research is complete, Harrison interrupted. We have everything we need to understand her capabilities. Thank you for your sacrifice, Dr. Cross. Your willingness to be manipulated has provided invaluable intelligence about her methods. That night, as I lay in the medical bay, fighting the sedatives they kept pumping into my system, I made a decision that would change the course of my life forever. I was going to see Zara one more time. The facility's security was designed to keep threats in, not to keep researchers out. After 3 years of studying the facility's systems in preparation for my assignment, I knew every security protocol, every camera blind spot, every guard rotation schedule. It took me 2 hours to make my way from the medical wing to the containment level, and another hour to bypass the locks on the chamber doors. Zara was sitting in the center of her cell, her luminescence so dim it was barely visible. When she heard me enter, she looked up with an expression of such profound sadness that it took my breath away. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll punish you for this." "I had to see you," I said, moving to the energy barrier. "I had to tell you that I believe you. What you showed me, it was real. I know it was real." "Marcus," her voice broke, and I saw tears, actual tears, streaming down her ethereal face. "I never meant to fall in love with you. I thought I could study your species through you, learn about human emotion without becoming vulnerable myself. But you made me remember what it felt like to hope. You were studying me." She nodded miserably. "At first, yes. Your emotional patterns, your responses to different stimuli, the way humans process complex feelings. I thought I could remain detached, analytical, but the more I learned about you, the more I cared. I should have felt betrayed. I should have felt manipulated and used. Instead, I felt something entirely different. I was studying you too," I admitted. "That was my job. To analyze your psychological patterns, understand your methods of manipulation. We were both trying to be clinical about something that became anything but clinical." "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "They're transferring me tomorrow. I'll probably never see you again." "Then let me give you something to remember," she said, moving as close to the barrier as she could. "Close your eyes, Marcus. Zara, if you project emotions into me again—" "Not emotions," she said softly. "Memories, my memories of us, of every conversation we've shared, every moment of connection, every time you made me feel less alone. Let me give you the gift of seeing yourself through my eyes." I closed my eyes and felt the familiar shift in the air. But this time, instead of overwhelming emotion, I experienced something gentler, a series of images and sensations from Zara's perspective. I saw myself as she saw me, not the awkward, emotionally guarded researcher I believed myself to be, but someone genuinely kind and curious, someone willing to listen without judgment, someone whose presence brought light into the darkness of her captivity. I felt her growing affection as we talked day after day, experienced her joy at my terrible jokes about human culture, felt her anticipation each time I entered the chamber, and I understood, finally, what Velthara truly meant. It wasn't just recognition. It was the profound understanding that two souls had found each other across impossible odds. When the projection ended, we stood there looking at each other through the energy barrier, both of us crying. "I love you," I said, the words feeling both natural and impossible. "And I love you," she replied, "which is why you have to go. Tomorrow, when they transfer you, you have to leave and never come back. Find someone of your own species, Marcus. Build a life that doesn't revolve around loving something you can never truly have. What about you?" "I will endure," she said, "as I have always endured. But now I will have something beautiful to remember during the long, empty years ahead." I placed my palm against the energy barrier, and she matched the gesture on her side. For a moment, I imagined I could feel the warmth of her skin through the crackling field. "I wish things were different," I whispered. "So do I," she whispered back. "So do I." The next morning, as they loaded me onto the transport shuttle, I looked back at the facility one last time. Somewhere in that mountain fortress, the being I loved was beginning another day of eternal captivity. And there was nothing I could do about it, or so I thought. 3 years have passed since I left Kepler 442b, and not a day goes by that I don't think of Zara. The official records list me as psychologically compromised, unsuitable for further xenological research. My career in academic science effectively ended the moment I admitted to falling in love with an alien prisoner. But I've found other ways to use my skills. Working now as a freelance consultant for humanitarian organizations, I've spent the last 3 years building a case for the ethical treatment of sentient alien prisoners. My report on the Velthani emotional communication systems has been submitted to the Galactic Ethics Council, along with detailed documentation of the circumstances surrounding Zara's capture and the tragic misunderstanding that led to 17 deaths. It's slow work, fighting against military bureaucracy and species prejudice, but I'm not the only one who believes that Zara deserves better. Dr. Chen, who worked on the original First Contact team, has come forward with new evidence suggesting that the incident during her capture was indeed accidental. Commander Torres, who was present during the interrogations, has testified about the inhumane conditions of her imprisonment. The case is building piece by piece. But the real breakthrough came 6 months ago when I received a coded transmission on a frequency I recognized from my research into Velthani technology. The message was brief. The silver moon rises over Velthara. The lost daughter calls to her people. Zara's people are still alive. The war that I thought had destroyed their civilization was real, but they survived, scattered across distant star systems. And somehow they've learned about one of their own being held prisoner by humanity. The negotiations are delicate, conducted through intermediaries and wrapped in layers of diplomatic protocol that would make your head spin. But progress is being made. The Velthani have technologies that could revolutionize human medicine, agriculture, and interstellar travel. Humanity has resources and knowledge that could help rebuild their scattered civilization. And at the center of these historic negotiations sits one request that the Velthani have made non-negotiable: the return of their daughter. I don't know if I'll ever see Zara again. Even if she's released, even if she's returned to her people, the chances of our paths crossing in the vast cosmos are impossibly small. But I take comfort in knowing that somewhere among the stars there might be a place where a being of light and beauty can finally come home. And sometimes late at night, I close my eyes and remember the feeling of Velthara, that moment of perfect recognition between two souls who found each other across the impossible divide of space and species and circumstance. Love, I've learned, isn't limited by the boundaries we think define us. Sometimes it reaches across the void between worlds, connects hearts that beat in different rhythms, speaks in languages that exist beyond words. Sometimes love is patient enough to wait for the universe to change. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, the universe listens, in memory of 17 souls lost to misunderstanding and in hope of a future where love transcends the boundaries of species, planet, and possibility. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey across the stars. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let me know what you thought in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more science fiction romance stories that explore the depths of love in impossible circumstances. Until next time, keep looking up at the stars, and remember, love finds a way, no matter how impossible it seems.